The first time Jim Rodway saw Almetta Smith across the Harvard Business School courtyard, time stopped and his world shifted forever. She was debating corporate ethics with three male students, her voice confident and melodious, her dark skin glowing in the autumn sunlight. While they argued with textbook theories, she spoke from lived experience about systemic inequality in business. Jim stood transfixed, his heart hammering against his ribs as if trying to escape and run to her. "You're staring," his roommate Chad whispered. "That's Almetta Smith, full scholarship from Detroit. Brilliant, but your family would literally disown you." Jim barely heard him. When Almetta laughed at something one of the debaters said, the sound struck him like lightning. He'd dated dozens of women from his social circle, blonde, boring, and predictable. But this woman radiated intelligence, strength, and a fire that called to something deep in his soul. For 3 weeks, he watched her from afar. Almetta Smith was everything he'd never known he wanted. She dominated every classroom discussion, worked 2 part-time jobs to pay for books, and carried herself with a dignity that made the other students seem like children playing dress-up. Finally, Jim gathered his courage. He found her in the library at midnight, surrounded by towers of books, her natural hair pulled back in a messy bun, glasses perched on her nose. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. She looked up, and her dark eyes studied him with sharp intelligence. "You're Jim Rodway. Your family owns half of Boston's real estate." "Guilty." He sat down carefully as if sudden movements might scare her away. "And you're Almetta Smith. You're going to revolutionize how business thinks about social responsibility." A smile tugged at her lips. "That's a bold prediction from someone who's never spoken to me. I've been listening to you in Professor Martinez's class. Your ideas about stakeholder capitalism aren't just theoretical, they're revolutionary." For the next 4 hours, they talked about everything and nothing. Jim found himself sharing dreams he'd never spoken aloud, while Almetta revealed vulnerabilities hidden beneath her fierce exterior. When the library closed, they walked through Harvard Yard under the stars, their conversation flowing like they'd known each other for years. "My family isn't going to like this," Jim said as they reached her dorm. Almetta's expression hardened slightly. "Because I'm black. Because you're perfect, and they hate anything that threatens their narrow world view." Jim stepped closer, his blue eyes intense. "But I don't care what they think. I've never felt anything like this before." Their first kiss was soft, tentative, electric. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is complicated," Almetta whispered. "The best things usually are." Over the following months, their love story unfolded like a beautiful rebellion. Jim defied his family's expectations at every turn. When his mother Patricia refused to meet Almetta, Jim brought her to the family's Thanksgiving dinner anyway. The tension was suffocating, but Jim held Almetta's hand throughout the meal, his message clear. She belonged wherever he was. "You're embarrassing this family," Patricia hissed as she served dessert, her voice low enough that only Jim could hear. "No, Mother. You're embarrassing this family with your bigotry." Jim's voice carried across the dining room, silencing conversations. "Almetta is going to be my wife, whether you accept it or not." The entire table went silent. Charles Rodway's face turned purple with rage, while Almetta squeezed Jim's hand, both terrified and amazed by his public declaration. "You're making a mistake," his father Charles warned him privately after dinner. "This infatuation will pass. Don't destroy your future for a fling." "It's not a fling," Jim replied firmly. "I love her more than I've ever loved anything." "Love?" Charles laughed bitterly. "Son, love is a luxury you can't afford. You have responsibilities to this family, to our legacy. My legacy will be the family I build with Almetta, not the prejudice I inherit from you." The confrontation escalated when Charles threatened to cut off Jim's trust fund. Jim's response was to move out of the family mansion that very night, showing up at Almeta's dorm with suitcases and determination. "You left your family for me?" Almeta asked, tears in her eyes as she helped him carry his belongings. "I left people who can't see your worth. You're my family now." But Jim was already lost to love. Almeta challenged him intellectually, supported his dreams, and loved him with a passion that made everything else pale in comparison. She tutored him in economics until his grades soared. She listened to his business ideas and offered insights that transformed them from good to brilliant. She made him want to be better than he'd ever thought possible. One evening in their second year, as they studied together in his off-campus apartment, Jim couldn't contain himself any longer. "Marry me," he said suddenly, looking up from his corporate finance textbook. Almeta's pen froze mid-sentence. "What?" "Marry me, Almeta. I know we're young, I know it's crazy, but I can't imagine my life without you." Jim dropped to his knees beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "You make me better. You make me brave. I want to build an empire with you, for our future children." Tears sparkled in Almeta's eyes. "Jim, your family will learn to love you like I do, or they'll lose me forever." His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I choose you, Almeta. I will always choose you." She said yes through tears and laughter, and Jim slipped his grandmother's engagement ring onto her finger, a stunning vintage piece he'd had reset with a larger diamond. That night, they made love with desperate passion, two souls cementing their bond against a world determined to tear them apart. The wedding planning was a war zone. Patricia Rodway made subtle threats about disinheritance while pretending to help. Charles alternated between bribery and intimidation, offering Jim everything from European business ventures to a trust fund that would set him up for life, all conditional on ending the engagement. "She's using you," Patricia hissed during one particularly ugly confrontation. "Can't you see? A girl from the project's latching onto our family's wealth." Jim's response was to have Almeta's name tattooed over his heart in elegant script, then show up to the next family dinner in a t-shirt that displayed it proudly. The small ceremony took place in Harvard's Memorial Chapel with only their closest friends present. Almeta wore a simple white dress that cost less than Patricia's shoes, but she looked like a queen. When Jim saw her walking down the aisle, tears streamed down his face. "You're beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "So beautiful." Their vows were personal, passionate, and defiant. Jim promised to love her against all odds, to build their dreams together, and to never let anyone make her feel less than the extraordinary woman she was. Almeta vowed to stand by him through every storm, to challenge him to greatness, and to love him with everything she had. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jim kissed her like his life depended on it. The small crowd erupted in cheers, but Jim and Almeta only had eyes for each other. Their honeymoon was a weekend in Cape Cod, all they could afford. They made love on the beach under the stars, planned their business empire over room service breakfast, and promised each other that poverty would never define them again. "We're going to have beautiful babies," Jim murmured against her neck as they lay tangled in hotel sheets. "Little girls with your brains and little boys with your courage." "What if they have your stubbornness?" Almeta teased, tracing patterns on his chest. "Then God help the world." 3 months later, Almeta missed her period. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, and their joy was indescribable. Jim cried when she told him, spinning her around their tiny apartment until they were both dizzy with laughter. "I'm going to be the best father," he promised, his hands protective on her still flat stomach. "Our child will grow up knowing they're loved beyond measure." "And knowing they can achieve anything," Almeta added. "No limits, no barriers." Jim knelt and kissed her belly tenderly. "Hello, little one. Your daddy loves you already." That night, Jim called his parents to share the news. The silence that followed was deafening. "Congratulations," Charles finally said, his voice flat. "I suppose we should discuss the future." "The future is perfect," Jim replied. "Almeta and I are going to raise an amazing child." "Son, it's time we had a serious conversation about your inheritance and your responsibilities to this family." But Jim was too happy to let his father's disapproval dampen his spirits. He had everything he'd ever wanted: the love of an extraordinary woman, a brilliant child on the way, and dreams big enough to conquer the world. As he held Almeta that night, feeling her peaceful breathing against his chest, Jim made a silent promise. No one would ever hurt his family. No one would ever make his wife or child feel unwanted or unwelcome. Their love would be their fortress, and their family would be their legacy. He had no idea that in 6 months he would break every promise he'd ever made. Chapter 2. The perfect storm of betrayal. The call that would destroy everything came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in February, when Almeta was 8 months pregnant and glowing with anticipation of meeting their daughter soon. "Mr. Rodway?" The voice was Dr. Harrison, the family physician. "I'm sorry to inform you that your father suffered a massive heart attack. He passed away 20 minutes ago." Jim's world tilted on its axis. Even at 8 months pregnant, Almeta immediately wrapped her arms around him as he crumbled, his sobs echoing through their small Cambridge apartment. Charles Rodway, for all his faults, had been the giant whose approval Jim had spent his life seeking. The funeral was a spectacle of Boston's elite, held at Trinity Church with over 1,000 mourners. Jim, hollow-eyed and devastated, delivered a eulogy that brought the congregation to tears. Almeta stood beside him, her pregnancy showing beautifully in her black dress, providing the strength he desperately needed. "Your father would be proud," she whispered as they left the church. "You honored him perfectly." But the real devastation was yet to come. 3 days later, the family gathered in Charles Rodway's mahogany-paneled office for the reading of the will. Patricia sat rigid in her chair, tissues clutched in her manicured hands. Jim held Almeta's hand tightly, both of them exhausted from grief and the demands of her pregnancy. Harold Blackwood, the family attorney for 30 years, cleared his throat nervously. "This is unprecedented," he began, his usually steady voice shaking. "Charles made significant changes to his will just 2 weeks before his death." Jim's stomach dropped. Something in Harold's tone promised catastrophe. "To my beloved son James," Harold read slowly, "I leave everything, Rodway Industries, all properties, investments and assets totaling approximately $500 million. Jim exhaled in relief, but Harold raised a trembling hand. "However, this inheritance comes with one absolute condition that cannot be contested or circumvented." The silence in the room was suffocating. Almeta's hand tightened in Jim's. "James must divorce his current wife within 30 days of my death and remain unmarried for a period of 5 years. If he fails to meet this condition, every asset will be donated to the United Foundation for Traditional Family Values. No exceptions, no alternatives." The words hit Jim like a physical blow. Almeta gasped, her free hand instinctively protecting her swollen belly. Patricia's tissues fell forgotten as her mouth opened in shock. "This is insane," Jim managed. "He can't do this." "I'm afraid he can," Harold said gently. "The will is ironclad. I tried to dissuade him, but Charles was adamant. He believed this was the only way to preserve the family legacy." Jim stared at the legal documents, his mind reeling. $500 million, his father's life work, the empire he'd been groomed to inherit since childhood, all of it contingent on abandoning the woman he loved and their unborn child. "Surely there's a way to contest this?" Almeta asked, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. Harold shook his head. Charles anticipated every legal challenge. The will has been reviewed by the state's best attorneys. It's unbreakable. That night, Jim paced their apartment like a caged animal while Almetta sat on their worn couch, her hands protectively cradling their child. "We'll find another way," she said quietly. "We don't need his money." $500 million, Almetta. 500 million. Jim's voice cracked. "We could give our child everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, generational wealth. Our child will have something better, parents who love each other." But doubt had already planted its poisonous seed. For days, Jim was tormented by visions of what that money could buy. Private jets, multiple homes, business empires, political influence. His child could attend the finest universities without scholarship stress. Almetta could have anything she wanted without counting pennies. Sleep became impossible. Jim would lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling while Almetta slept peacefully beside him, her pregnant form beautiful in the moonlight. $500 million. The number consumed his thoughts like a fever. With that kind of wealth, he could give his family everything, but only if he destroyed his family first. "You look terrible," Almetta observed one morning, bringing him coffee in bed. "Are you sleeping at all?" "Just thinking about the future," Jim replied, unable to meet her eyes. "Our future is going to be beautiful," she said, settling beside him with difficulty as her pregnancy advanced. "This baby is going to have so much love." Love. The word twisted in Jim's stomach like a knife. Love versus $500 million. Why had his father made him choose? Meanwhile, his mother worked her own dark magic. "That girl trapped you with a pregnancy," Patricia whispered during one of her increasingly frequent visits. "Can't you see? She's been planning this from the beginning. A scholarship girl from the ghetto, snagging a Rodway heir. It's the oldest trick in the book." "Stop," Jim warned, but his mother pressed on relentlessly. "Your father saw through her manipulation. That's why he protected our family with this will. That baby isn't even necessarily yours. Have you had a paternity test?" "Of course not. I trust my wife." "Trust?" Patricia laughed coldly. "Jim, you've known this girl for 2 years. I've seen women like her my entire life. Ambitious, calculating, willing to do anything for money and status." Each conversation left Jim more poisoned, more suspicious. He began watching Almetta differently, analyzing her every word for hidden agendas. When she suggested they name their daughter after his grandmother, was that manipulation? When she worked extra hours at her part-time job to save money for baby supplies, was that guilt tactics? "I love you," she would say as they lay in bed, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "I love you too," he would reply, but the words felt hollow. $500 million echoed louder than any declaration of love. 2 weeks into the 30-day deadline, Cassandra Webb returned to Boston. Cassandra had been Jim's fiancée before Harvard, before Almetta, before his world had turned upside down. Tall, blonde, and elegantly beautiful, she represented everything his family wanted for him. More importantly, she represented the path not taken. "I heard about your father," she said when she appeared at his office, "and about his will." "Cassandra, I can't." "I know about the conditions, Jim. The whole city knows." She moved closer, her perfume familiar and intoxicating. "I also know you have a decision to make. I'm married. I'm having a child. With a woman who's destroyed your relationship with your family, alienated you from your inheritance, and trapped you with a pregnancy." Cassandra's voice was soft, reasonable. "Jim, you could have everything back. Your father's empire, your mother's approval, the life you were meant to live. I love Almetta. Do you? Or do you love the idea of rebelling against your family?" Cassandra stepped closer still. "That scholarship girl has taken everything from you. Your inheritance, your family relationships, your future. What has she given you besides problems?" That night, Jim stared at Almetta as she slept. her pregnant form beautiful in the moonlight. She looked peaceful, trusting, completely unaware that he was wrestling with the devil. By the third week, Jim was barely sleeping, barely eating. The weight of the decision was crushing him. Almeta tried to help, bringing him his favorite foods, massaging his shoulders, listening to his fears without judgment. "Whatever you decide, I'll understand," she lied beautifully one evening. "I won't hate you if you choose the inheritance." "Don't say that. I'm serious, Jim. That money could change our child's entire life. I'll always love you, no matter what." Her selflessness made his betrayal even more devastating. On day 27, Cassandra appeared at their apartment with shocking news. "I've had my lawyers review those documents you signed when you got married," she announced, spreading papers across their kitchen table. "The ones making Almeta your equal partner in all business ventures." "What about them?" Almeta asked, but her voice was already tense with dread. Cassandra smiled coldly. "They're forgeries. The signatures are real, but the actual legal language is completely different. Instead of giving Almeta partnership rights, they actually transfer all of her assets and any future earnings to Jim. She owns nothing. He owns everything, including anything she might inherit or earn." Almeta's face went white. "That's impossible. Jim's been systematically stealing from you since your wedding day," Cassandra continued mercilessly. "Every dollar you've earned, every asset you've acquired, it all belongs to him legally. You have nothing." Jim's silence was deafening. He stared at the papers, his face a mask of guilt and shame. "Jim," Almeta whispered, "tell her she's lying." But Jim couldn't meet her eyes. The truth was even worse than Cassandra revealed. He had known exactly what those papers contained when Almeta signed them. His father had insisted on protecting the family assets, and Jim had justified it as a temporary measure, something he'd fix after they were established. Now, faced with losing $500 million, those papers looked like providence. "The divorce will be simple," Cassandra said softly. "Almeta gets nothing, owes nothing, and Jim keeps both the inheritance and everything they've acquired during the marriage." Almeta looked at Jim with dawning horror. "You've known this whole time." His continued silence was answer enough. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Jim slept on the couch. Above him, he could hear Almeta crying, heartbroken sobs that tore at his soul. But every tear she shed was worth $1 million of his inheritance. On day 29, with just 24 hours remaining, Jim made his choice. Greed had conquered love. Chapter 3. The Cruelest Cut. The contractions started at 4 a.m. on day 30, exactly when Jim's deadline to divorce Almeta expired, as if their child sensed the tragedy about to unfold and was fighting to enter the world before it could be torn apart. "Jim, wake up!" Almeta gasped, shaking his shoulder as pain seized her swollen belly. "The baby's coming." Jim jolted awake on their couch, his neck stiff from another night avoiding their marital bed. For a moment, seeing Almeta doubled over in pain, his husband instincts kicked in. He jumped up, grabbing her hospital bag and keys. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll get you to the hospital. Everything's going to be fine." But as he helped her to the car, Jim's phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. "Papers are ready. Car waiting at hospital to take you to courthouse. Don't lose $500 million for one night of guilt." The 20-minute drive to Boston General was torture. Almeta gripped his hand between contractions, her face shining with sweat and determination. "She's early," Almeta panted, "but she's strong. I can feel it." "Just like her mother," Jim replied automatically, though his voice sounded hollow even to him. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Almeta was wheelchair-rushed to the maternity ward while Jim handled admissions paperwork. His hands shook as he signed forms, knowing these would be among the last documents he'd ever sign as her husband. Dr. Rodriguez, their obstetrician, examined Almeta and smiled. You're almost fully dilated. This little one is eager to meet the world." "Where's Jim?" Almeta asked, looking around the delivery room frantically. "He's just making some phone calls," a nurse assured her. "He'll be right back." But Jim wasn't making phone calls. He was standing in the hospital corridor, staring at divorce papers that Harold Blackwood had just delivered personally. "I'm sorry it's come to this," the elderly lawyer said gently. "But if you don't file these within the next 6 hours, you lose everything. Your father's will specifies midnight on the 30th day. She's in labor," Jim said numbly. "I know, the timing is unfortunate, but business waits for no one, not even births." Through the delivery room window, Jim could see Almeta searching for him, her face twisted with labor pain and confusion. She needed him. Their child was coming into the world, and she needed her husband beside her. Instead, Jim turned away and signed the papers. The next 4 hours were the longest of Almeta's life. She labored alone except for nurses, asking constantly for Jim, unable to understand why he'd disappeared during the most important moment of their lives. "Please find my husband," she begged Dr. Rodriguez between contractions. "I need him here." "I'm sure he'll be back soon," the doctor replied, but his expression was troubled. In 30 years of delivering babies, he'd never seen a father vanish during active labor. At 2:17 p.m., Melody Rodway entered the world screaming with indignation, as if she already sensed the injustice awaiting her. She was perfect. 8 pounds, 2 ounces of pure beauty with Jim's blue eyes and Almeta's determined chin. "She's gorgeous," Dr. Rodriguez said, placing the baby on Almeta's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Almeta wept as she held her daughter for the first time. "Hello, baby girl. Mummy's here. Daddy's coming soon." But Daddy wasn't coming. At 2:45 p.m., while Almeta was being stitched up and cleaned, Jim finally appeared. But he wasn't alone. Harold Blackwood accompanied him, along with 2 courthouse officials and a notary public. "Mrs. Rodway," Harold said formally, "I need to serve you with some legal documents." Almeta, still holding her newborn daughter, looked up in confusion. "What documents? Where have you been, Jim?" Jim stood at the foot of her hospital bed, his face a mask of cold resolution. "Almeta, I'm filing for divorce." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What did you say?" "You heard me. I'm divorcing you, effective immediately." "Jim, I just gave birth to our daughter 28 minutes ago. What are you talking about?" "Our daughter." Jim's laugh was bitter and cruel. "How do I even know she's mine? A girl from the projects, hooking up with anyone who could advance her position." Almeta's face went white with shock. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." Jim's voice turned to ice, all pretense of love evaporating. "Did you really think I could love someone like you, someone from your background? Someone like me?" Almeta's voice shattered. "Jim, you said you loved me. You married me. You tattooed my name on your heart. I was young and stupid. My fraternity brothers bet me. I couldn't get the scholarship girl to fall for me. Congratulations, Almeta. You helped me win $5,000. The lie came so easily that Jim almost believed it himself. Almeta's face crumpled, as if he'd physically struck her. "That's not true. You love me. I know you love me." "Love?" Jim laughed again. "I used you. You were an experiment, a walk on the wild side before I settled down with someone appropriate, someone like Cassandra." As if summoned by her name, Cassandra appeared in the doorway, radiant in a white designer dress, a 3-carat engagement ring sparkling on her finger. "Hello, Almeta," she said sweetly. "Congratulations on the baby. Jim and I are getting married next week." Almeta looked between them, her world disintegrating. "This is a nightmare. Tell me this is a nightmare." "Sign the papers," Jim said coldly, "and I'll make sure you get bus fare back to Detroit." "I'm not signing anything. This is insane." You're having some kind of breakdown." Harold stepped forward with the divorce documents. "Mrs. Rodway, I'm afraid you have no choice. The prenuptial agreements you signed give you no rights to any marital assets. You'll leave with exactly what you brought to the marriage." "Which was nothing," Cassandra added with false sympathy. "The baby," Almetta whispered, clutching Melody closer. "She's your daughter." "Prove it," Jim said. "And even if she is, I don't want her. A constant reminder of my biggest mistake? No, thank you." "Jim, please, this isn't you. Something's wrong. You're not thinking clearly." But Jim was already turning away. "Security will escort you out once you're discharged. Don't try to contact me. Don't try to come to my home or office. You're nothing to me now. You always were nothing." As Jim and Cassandra left together, Almetta heard him say, "500 million, baby. We'll build an empire." Cassandra's laughter echoed down the hospital corridor like breaking glass. Alone in the hospital room, still bleeding from childbirth, holding a daughter whose father had just denied her existence, Almetta finally broke. Her sobs echoed through the maternity ward, heartbroken wails that brought nurses running. "Mrs. Rodway, what's wrong?" "He left us," Almetta whispered to the attending nurse. "He abandoned us both." Dr. Rodriguez examined the divorce papers that had been left behind and shook his head in disgust. "In 30 years of practice, I've never witnessed anything so cruel." "What am I going to do?" Almetta asked, her voice breaking. "I have no money, no home, no family here. How do I take care of her?" The doctor was quiet for a long moment, watching baby Melody sleep peacefully in her mother's arms. "You'll find a way. Mothers always do. And someday, that man will realize what he destroyed." But that provided no comfort to Almetta as she spent her first night as a single mother in a hospital bed, holding her perfect daughter and trying to figure out how they would survive. Outside her window, snow began to fall on Boston, as if the sky itself was weeping for the family that had just been destroyed by greed and cowardice. At midnight, Jim officially inherited $500 million. By morning, Almetta and Melody were homeless. Chapter 4. Surviving the Storm. The women's shelter smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, but it was the only roof Almetta could find for herself and 3-day-old Melody after being discharged from the hospital with nowhere to go. "Bed 14, the intake coordinator said without looking up from her paperwork. "Lights out at 10 p.m., breakfast at 6 a.m. No visitors, no alcohol, no drugs. Break the rules, you're out." Almetta clutched her hospital bag and Melody's carrier, surveying the dormitory-style room filled with narrow cots and desperate women. Some stared at her with curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. A teenage girl with track marks on her arms sneered at the sight of Almetta's wedding ring. "Fresh divorce?" the girl asked mockingly. "Let me guess, rich husband traded you in for a newer model?" Almetta didn't answer. She was too exhausted to explain, too heartbroken to relive the betrayal that had landed them here. She simply found her assigned bed, set up Melody's borrowed bassinet, and tried not to cry. That first night was hell. Melody cried constantly, her newborn wails echoing through the shelter and earning glares from women trying to sleep. Almetta paced the hallway at 2 a.m., rocking her daughter and whispering apologies. "I'm sorry, baby girl. Mama's so sorry. We'll find somewhere better, I promise." But better seemed impossible. Almetta had exactly $47 to her name, money she'd hidden in her purse that had survived Jim's financial theft. She had no family to call. Her parents had died in a car accident during her sophomore year at Harvard, and she'd burned bridges with childhood friends when she left Detroit for Boston's elite world. On her 4th day at the shelter, Rosa Martinez found her crying in the bathroom while Melody screamed in her arms. "First time?" Rosa asked gently. She was 40-something, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. First time homeless, yes. Hopefully the last. What happened? Almeta told her story. The whirlwind romance, the betrayal, the divorce papers served in a maternity ward. Rosa listened without judgment, occasionally shaking her head in disgust. Men like that should burn in hell, Rosa said finally. But crying won't feed your baby. You need a plan. Rosa became Almeta's lifeline. She'd been in and out of shelters for years, knew every resource, every program, every trick for survival. She taught Almeta how to stretch formula, where to find free diapers, which churches served the best meals. Rule 1, Rosa explained as they waited in line for free breakfast. Never let them see you broken. The moment they think you're weak, they'll treat you like garbage. I feel broken. Feeling it and showing it are different things. That little girl needs to see strength, not defeat. Almeta took the advice to heart. She applied for welfare, food stamps and housing assistance, enduring condescending social workers who treated her like a statistic instead of a Harvard MBA who'd lost everything through betrayal. Education, the welfare clerk asked, barely glancing up from her computer. Master's degree in business administration from Harvard. The clerk snorted. Right, and I'm a rocket scientist. Put down high school diploma. The humiliation was constant, but Almeta swallowed her pride for Melody's sake. Her daughter needed food, shelter, and healthcare. Dignity was a luxury she couldn't afford. The welfare office became a weekly ritual of degradation. Caseworkers spoke to her like she was mentally deficient, making her repeat information multiple times and questioning every detail of her story. You say you have a master's degree from Harvard? Asked Mrs. Patterson, a tired-looking woman with suspicious eyes. Then why can't you find a job? I've been trying. Have you considered that maybe you're being too picky? McDonald's is hiring. Almeta bit her tongue and nodded. Yes, ma'am. I'll apply there too. And the father? Where's his child support? He terminated his parental rights. Convenient. Let me guess. You don't know where he is now? The implication was clear. Mrs. Patterson believed Almeta was lying about everything. Another welfare queen with a sob story, trying to game the system. Finding work proved nearly impossible. Employers took one look at her temporary shelter address and immediately lost interest. The few who interviewed her questioned her gaps in employment, her lack of references, her situation. A Harvard MBA applying for retail work, one manager asked suspiciously. What's the real story here? Drugs? Mental health issues? No, sir. I just need to support my daughter. Right, and I'm sure this is temporary until your big break comes along. The sarcasm was cutting. Almeta forced herself to smile. I'll work as hard as you need me to. We'll call you. They never did. Finally, after 2 weeks of rejections, she found work at a 24-hour diner called Murphy's. The owner, Sean Murphy, was a gruff Irish immigrant who didn't care about her education or circumstances. Can you work nights? He asked during their 5-minute interview. Yes. Can you handle drunk customers without calling the police every 10 minutes? Yes. Can you clean vomit off tables without complaining? Almeta's stomach turned, but she nodded. Absolutely. Can you start tonight? Yes, sir. The job paid minimum wage plus tips, barely enough to survive. Almeta worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., sleeping during the day while Rosa watched Melody. The arrangement wasn't ideal, but it was survival. Rosa became more than a friend. She became Almeta's lifeline and teacher. Rule number 1, Rosa explained as they waited in line for free breakfast at a local church. Never let them see you broken. The moment they think you're weak, they'll treat you like garbage. I feel broken. Feeling it and showing it are different things. That little girl needs to see strength, not defeat. How do you stay strong when everything is falling apart? Rosa studied Almeta's face carefully. You remember why you're fighting, not for yourself, for her. Every humiliation you swallow, every insult you ignore, every night you work until your feet bleed, it's all so she has chances you didn't have. What if it's not enough? What if I fail her? Then you get up and try again. That's what mothers do. The night shift at Murphy's was brutal. Almetta served coffee to insomniacs, drunk college students, and night shift workers, who often left no tips and sometimes grabbed her inappropriately. She endured it all with gritted teeth, remembering Rosa's advice about showing strength. "You're different from our usual girls," observed Detective Mike Sullivan, a regular customer who came in around 3 a.m. during his patrol breaks. "You speak like you went to college." "I did." "What happened?" Almetta poured his coffee and shrugged. "Life happened." Mike became protective of her, making sure drunk customers kept their hands to themselves and sometimes leaving extra large tips. "You won't be here forever," he told her one night. "Whatever brought you down, you'll climb back up." "How do you know?" "Because you still fight. I see women who've given up, and you're not one of them." Years later, when Almetta's consulting business took off and she could afford to quit the diner, she made sure to find Mike and thank him for his kindness during her darkest hours. His faith in her recovery had been one of the few lights in that terrible period. During her breaks, Almetta studied. She read business journals from the library, analyzed market trends, and developed ideas for companies she might someday start. Melody slept in her carrier beside the break room table while Almetta planned their escape from poverty. One night, while serving a table of young executives celebrating a business deal, Almetta overheard their conversation about marketing strategies. They were struggling with a campaign for urban demographics, throwing around ideas that were tone-deaf and offensive. "Excuse me," Almetta interrupted, refilling their coffee. "I couldn't help overhearing. Have you considered approaching the urban market through community leaders rather than traditional advertising?" The executives looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "Sorry?" "Community-based marketing, partner with local churches, schools, and neighborhood organizations. People trust recommendations from leaders they know more than glossy advertisements." One of the men laughed. "Thanks for the input, but we'll stick to professional advice." But the youngest executive, a woman named Jennifer Chen, lingered after the others left. "That was smart," Jennifer said. "Where did you learn about community marketing?" "Harvard Business School." Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." They talked for 20 minutes before Jennifer had to leave. She handed Almetta her business card. "I run a small consulting firm, if you ever want to discuss some freelance work." It was the first crack of light Almetta had seen in the darkness. The freelance work started small. Jennifer hired Almetta to research demographic data for $50 per report. Almetta worked on her laptop in the diner during quiet periods, producing analyses that impressed Jennifer's clients. Word spread quietly through Boston's business community about the brilliant consultant who delivered exceptional market insights at bargain rates. Almetta began earning additional income writing reports, developing strategies, and analyzing consumer trends. She used every extra dollar to improve their situation. They moved from the shelter to a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood, not safe, but private. Almetta bought a used crib for Melody and a desk for herself. She enrolled in community college business courses to stay sharp. "You're building something," Rosa observed when she visited their tiny apartment. "I can see it in your eyes." "We can't stay at the bottom forever," Almetta replied, bouncing 6-month-old Melody on her hip. "This little girl deserves better." "What about her father?" Almetta's expression hardened. "He made his choice. We'll make ours." Rosa smiled proudly. "That's the fighter I knew you were." She became like a grandmother to Melody, and even after Almetta's success allowed them to move to better neighborhoods, Rosa remained part of their chosen family, proof that the bonds forged in struggle often proved stronger than blood. Late at night, after Melody was asleep, Almetta would stand at their single window looking out at Boston's skyline. Somewhere out there, Jim was living in luxury with Cassandra, enjoying the $500 million he'd chosen over his family. "One day," she whispered to the sleeping city, "we'll be living up there too, and when we are, he'll realize what he threw away." But revenge felt distant and impossible. Survival was all that mattered now. At 1 year old, Melody took her first steps in their cramped apartment, while Almetta was working on a consulting report. Her daughter's delighted giggles filled the space as she toddled from the crib toward her mother's desk. "Mama!" Melody squealed, reaching for the laptop keyboard. Almetta scooped her up, spinning her around the tiny room. "You're walking, baby girl. You're actually walking." As she held her daughter, Almetta made a silent vow. This poverty was temporary. This struggle was just the beginning of their story, not the end. Melody would grow up knowing she could achieve anything, become anyone, and someday, the man who had abandoned them would pay for his cruelty. Outside their window, snow began falling again. But inside their small apartment, mother and daughter danced together, building dreams from nothing but love and determination. The empire they would build together was still just a whisper of possibility, but it was growing stronger every day. Chapter 5. Building from Ashes. 5 years after being thrown out of a Boston hospital with nothing but a newborn and broken dreams, Almetta Smith stood in the conference room of Chen and Associates, presenting a marketing strategy that would revolutionize how corporations approached urban demographics. "The key is authenticity," she explained to the 8 executives seated around the polished table. "You can't market to communities you don't understand, and you can't understand them without genuine engagement." Jennifer Chen beamed with pride as Almetta commanded the room. What had started as $50 freelance reports had evolved into Almetta, becoming the firm's most sought-after strategist, though she still technically worked as an independent contractor. "Ms. Smith," interrupted Robert Kowalski, CEO of a major retail chain, "your proposals are impressive, but implementing them would require significant cultural shifts in our marketing departments." "Mr. Kowalski," Almetta replied smoothly, "significant profits require significant changes. My research shows you're losing 30% potential revenue in urban markets because your current approach alienates the very consumers you're trying to reach." Melody sat quietly in the corner, coloring in a business notebook while listening to every word. Almetta had been forced to bring her daughter to work when her babysitter cancelled, but Melody was so well behaved that nobody minded. What the executives didn't realize was that Melody wasn't just coloring, she was taking notes. Her childish handwriting filled the margins with observations like, "They don't listen to customers," and "Why don't they ask what people want?" "Mama," Melody whispered during a break, tugging on Almetta's sleeve, "why don't they just ask people what they want instead of guessing?" Several executives overheard and chuckled, but Almetta's eyes lit up. She knelt down to her daughter's level, studying the little girl's serious expression. "Say that again, sweetheart, but louder so everyone can hear." Melody stood up with the confidence of someone who'd been sitting in business meetings since she could walk. "If they want to sell things to people, why don't they ask those people what they want?" The room fell silent as the simplicity of her logic hit them. Robert Kowalski leaned forward in his chair, staring at the 6-year-old who'd just identified the fundamental flaw in his company's approach. "Gentlemen," Almetta said, turning back to the room with a brilliant smile, "I'd like you to meet my business partner. She just solved your consumer research problem." "Ms. Smith," Kowalski said slowly, "your daughter might be onto something. We spend millions on demographic studies and focus groups, but we never directly engage with communities about their actual needs." "Exactly. And if a 6-year-old can see that, Imagine what your customers have been thinking. The presentation was a tremendous success. Kowalski signed a six-figure contract on the spot, and two other companies requested similar strategies. As they packed up to leave, Jennifer pulled Almeta aside. That was brilliant. Both the strategy and bringing Melody. She's incredibly perceptive. She's been sitting in on business meetings since she was 2, Almeta explained. Sometimes I think she understands corporate psychology better than most adults. Have you considered that she might actually be your secret weapon? What do you mean? Children see things adults miss because they haven't learned to complicate simple truths yet. Maybe Melody should be part of your consulting process. That night, in their small 2-bedroom apartment they'd moved to the year before, Almeta celebrated by making Melody's favorite mac and cheese while her daughter did homework at the kitchen table. "Mama, what's a partnership?" Melody asked, looking up from her math worksheet. "It means Mama and Miss Jennifer are going to build a business together." "Can I help?" Almeta sat down beside her daughter, studying the little girl who'd become her greatest strength. Melody had Jim's striking eyes, but Almeta's determination and intelligence. At 6, she was reading at a 5th-grade level and showed an intuitive understanding of business concepts that amazed adults. "Would you like to help?" "Yes, I have lots of ideas." "Like what?" "Well, today those men kept talking about target demographics, but they never said they talked to actual people. And that lady from the fashion company said teenage girls don't know what they want, but I think teenage girls know exactly what they want. Adults just don't listen." Almeta stared at her daughter with amazement. "Melody, you're absolutely right. I know, I pay attention when you work. Most adults make things too complicated. Okay, but first we need to finish your homework. Education comes first, always." "I know, Mama, education is power, and power is freedom." It was a mantra Almeta had taught her from the beginning. Education had been Almeta's escape from poverty once before, and it would be Melody's foundation for everything. Over the next 2 years, Smith Chen Strategic Consulting grew rapidly. Almeta's innovative approaches to urban marketing attracted corporate clients nationwide. She traveled frequently, taking Melody with her when possible, exposing her daughter to airports, hotels, and business meetings. "This is how successful people live," Almeta would tell Melody as they stayed in upscale hotels during business trips. "This is what we're building toward." Melody absorbed everything like a sponge. She learned to read financial statements by studying her mother's work, understood market analysis from sitting in on presentations, and developed social skills by charming clients who were impressed by her poise and intelligence. "Your daughter is remarkable," noted Patricia Williams, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, after 8-year-old Melody had politely suggested a new approach to their teen marketing initiatives. "Has she considered business school?" "She's 8, Almeta laughed. "I'm serious. My nephew goes to Harvard, and he's not half as sharp as she is." At night, after Melody was asleep, Almeta worked on expanding their business. She'd moved them to a beautiful 3-bedroom townhouse in a safe neighborhood, but she wanted more. Much more. "We need our own firm," she told Jennifer one evening as they reviewed quarterly reports. "Smith Chen is successful, but we're still small scale." "What did you have in mind?" "Global consulting, Fortune 500 clients, government contracts, real power." Jennifer studied her partner's face. "This is about more than money, isn't it?" Almeta was quiet for a moment. "I want my daughter to grow up in a world where no one can take everything away from her because of who she is or where she came from. And I want certain people to realize exactly what they threw away." Almeta's voice turned steel hard. 18 years from now, I want the man who destroyed us to look up and see us owning everything he thought he was too good to share." That night, after Melody was asleep, Almeta sat at their kitchen table with newspaper clippings spread before her, articles about Jim's business successes, photos of him at charity galas, mentions of his growing wealth. She studied each one like a general planning a war. "One day, baby girl," she whispered to the sleeping house, "one day he'll understand that the family he threw away became everything he'll never be." She didn't know that 9-year-old Melody was awake in her bedroom, listening through the thin walls, absorbing every word and making her own silent promises about the future. That summer, Almeta made a decision that would change everything. She enrolled 9-year-old Melody in an accelerated summer program at MIT designed for gifted children interested in technology and business. "Are you sure she's ready?" Jennifer asked. "She's still just a little girl." "She's been ready since she was 6. I'm just finally catching up." Melody thrived at MIT. While other children her age were playing video games, she was learning programming languages and developing apps. Her final project, a simple customer feedback platform, caught the attention of the program director. "Mrs. Smith," Dr. Elizabeth Harper said during the closing ceremony, "your daughter has extraordinary potential. Have you considered having her tested for advanced placement programs?" "What kind of programs?" "There are schools designed for exceptionally gifted children. Melody could potentially graduate high school by 14 and enter university immediately." That night, Almeta sat with Melody on their couch, discussing possibilities. "Do you want to skip ahead in school, sweetheart? Will it help me build businesses like you do?" "It could, but you'd miss out on some normal childhood experiences." Melody was quiet for a moment, then looked up with determination that reminded Almeta painfully of Jim. "Mama, normal kids don't have to rebuild their lives from nothing. I do. I want to learn everything as fast as I can." Almeta's heart broke a little. Her daughter should have been worried about playground games and sleepovers, not rebuilding family empires. But she also felt fierce pride. Melody had inherited the best of both parents, Jim's ambition and Almeta's resilience. "Okay, baby girl, we'll look into it." Look. By age 10, Melody was attending a specialized academy for gifted children, taking high school-level courses and spending afternoons working alongside her mother. She'd developed an intuitive understanding of market psychology that impressed even experienced consultants. "Mama," she said one day while they reviewed a client proposal, "why are we helping other people build their companies instead of building our own?" It was the question Almeta had been waiting for. "What did you have in mind?" "Technology. All these companies need better ways to understand their customers. We could build software that does it automatically." Almeta stared at her daughter with amazement. "Melody, that's brilliant." "I know," Melody replied with the matter-of-fact confidence of a child genius. "I've been thinking about it for months." That weekend, they started planning their tech company. Almeta handled the business strategy while Melody, with help from her MIT contacts, began developing prototype software for automated consumer analysis. Smith Technologies was born in their townhouse basement with a 10-year-old CEO and her mother as COO. Their first client was Jennifer Chen, who paid them $50,000 to develop a custom analysis platform. "You realize this is insane," Jennifer said as she signed the contract. "I'm hiring a 10-year-old. "You're hiring a 10-year-old genius," Almeta corrected. "There's a difference." Within 6 months, Smith Technologies had grown from a basement operation to a legitimate company with office space, employees and contracts worth millions. Melody balanced school with CEO duties, displaying leadership skills that amazed everyone who worked with her. "She's incredible," marveled David Kim, their lead programmer. "I've worked with tech CEOs half her age who don't understand their products this well." Meanwhile, across Boston, Jim Rodway was struggling to maintain his father's empire. Rodway Industries had been built on old-fashioned business models that were rapidly becoming obsolete. Younger, more innovative companies were eating into their market share, and Jim's leadership style, arrogant and inflexible, wasn't adapting well to changing times. "We need new strategies," his board kept telling him. "The market is shifting toward technology integration." "My father built this company on solid fundamentals," Jim would reply. "We don't need to chase every tech fad." But the tech fads were revolutionizing entire industries, and Rodway Industries was being left behind. Neither Jim nor his mother Patricia paid attention to the growing success of Smith Technologies. The name meant nothing to them, and even if they'd investigated, they'd never imagined that the homeless woman they'd discarded 10 years earlier was building an empire that would soon dwarf their own. On Melody's 11th birthday, as they celebrated in their new corporate headquarters, Almeta made a private promise. "Soon, baby girl. Very soon, we'll be ready to show the world what we've built." Melody looked up from her birthday cake, her eyes fierce with determination that reminded Almeta painfully of Jim. "And then we take back everything that should have been ours from the beginning." Outside their office windows, Boston's skyline glittered with possibility. Somewhere in that maze of lights and steel, Jim Rodway was losing everything he'd once stolen from them, and he didn't even know it yet. Chapter 6. The Prodigy Emerges. Melody. Smith discovered the truth about her father on a rainy Thursday afternoon when she was 15, sitting in her mother's office reviewing quarterly reports that showed Smith Technologies had just exceeded $50 million in annual revenue. She wasn't supposed to find the folder marked "Personal Confidential" in Almeta's locked desk drawer. She'd been looking for a spare USB drive when the drawer stuck, revealing a hidden compartment containing newspaper clippings, legal documents, and photographs spanning 20 years. The first photo took her breath away. Her mother, radiant and young, in a wedding dress standing beside a tall, blonde man whose blue eyes were identical to the ones Melody saw in the mirror every morning. "James Rodway weds Almeta Smith in intimate Harvard ceremony," read the newspaper caption from 16 years ago. Melody's hands shook as she flipped through more clippings, photos of her parents at business events, articles about Jim inheriting Rodway Industries, and then the devastating coverage of their divorce. Rodway heir abandons pregnant wife for family fortune. But it was the final document that shattered everything Melody thought she knew about herself. Her original birth certificate listing James Charles Rodway as her father. "Melody?" Almeta's voice came from the office doorway. "What are you doing in my desk?" Melody turned around, tears streaming down her face, holding the birth certificate. "My name isn't Smith, is it? It's Rodway." Almeta's face went pale. She closed the office door carefully before approaching her daughter. "How much did you read?" "All of it." Melody's voice was steady despite her tears. "He's my father. The man who owns Rodway Industries is my biological father, and he abandoned us before I was even born." Almeta sat down heavily in her chair. "I was going to tell you when you turned 18. Why? So I could spend 3 more years wondering why I never felt like I belonged anywhere. Because I wanted you to be strong enough to handle the truth. I've been strong enough since I was 10. Melody's composure cracked. "All this time, you've been building our company to compete with his, haven't you? This isn't just about business success, it's about revenge." Almeta was quiet for a long moment. "Yes. Good." Melody's tears stopped, and her expression hardened into something that looked remarkably like Jim Rodway at his most determined. "Tell me everything, every detail about what he did to us." Over the next 2 hours, Almeta revealed the complete story. The passionate love affair, the devastating betrayal, the divorce papers served in a maternity ward, the years of poverty and struggle. She held nothing back, watching her daughter's face grow colder with each revelation. "He claimed I was just a bet," Melody asked when the story ended. "His exact words. And he said he didn't want me because I'd be a constant reminder of his biggest mistake." "Yes." Melody was quiet for several minutes, processing everything. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a maturity far beyond her 15 years. "Show me everything else," she said suddenly. "Every document, every article, every piece of evidence about what he did to us." For the next hour, Almeta spread 20 years of carefully collected materials across her office floor. Newspaper clippings about Jim's lavish lifestyle with Cassandra, financial reports showing Rodway Industries' growth built on the inheritance he'd chosen over his family, photos of him at charity galas and business events, living the life he'd stolen from them. "Look at this," Melody said, holding up a society page photo of Jim and Cassandra at a cancer fundraiser. "He's donating money to help sick children while he abandoned his own healthy daughter." "Melody, no, Mama. I need to see all of it. I need to understand exactly who he is." She picked up another article. Here he is talking about family values at a business conference. Family values from a man who threw his family away for money. Almeta watched her daughter's face transform as the full scope of Jim's hypocrisy became clear. The hurt was still there, but it was being forged into something harder and more dangerous. How close are we to being bigger than Rodway Industries? In annual revenue, we're about 1/10 their size, but they're hemorrhaging money while we're growing exponentially. How long before we could buy them out? Almeta blinked in surprise. "Melody, that's not—" "How long? If current trends continue, maybe 8 to 10 years. Too long." Melody stood up and began pacing, her brilliant mind already working through possibilities. "I want to graduate high school next year. Then I want to go to Harvard Business School." "Sweetheart, you're only 15. "I'll be 16 when I graduate. Harvard has admitted younger students before." Melody stopped pacing and fixed her mother with an intense stare. "I want his alma mater on my resume when I destroy him." "Melody, he threw us away like garbage, Mama. He chose money over his own child. He doesn't get to live happily ever after while we struggled." Melody's voice grew stronger with each word. "I'm going to take everything he has, everything he chose over us, and I'm going to make him watch while I do it." The transformation in her daughter both thrilled and terrified Almeta. "This isn't just about money or business anymore, is it?" It never was. Melody sat back down, her expression calm, but her eyes burning with purpose. "He needs to understand that the daughter he rejected became everything he'll never be. And when I'm done, he'll know that losing us was the worst mistake of his pathetic life." What if this consumes you? What if revenge becomes more important than your own happiness? Melody considered this seriously. "Mama, you spent 20 years building strength from his betrayal. You never let it make you bitter or cruel. You taught me that success is the best revenge because it proves we didn't need him." She reached for her mother's hand. "I'm not doing this from hatred. I'm doing this from justice. There's a difference." From that day forward, Melody attacked her education with frightening intensity. She completed her remaining high school requirements in 8 months, scored perfect SATs, and applied early admission to Harvard Business School with a portfolio that left admissions officers speechless. Her application essay began, "At 15 years old, I am the CEO of a $50 million technology company that I built from my mother's basement. This is not a story about privilege or inheritance. This is a story about what happens when you underestimate the daughter you never wanted." Harvard accepted her immediately, but Melody wasn't content to wait for college. During her gap year, she accelerated Smith Technologies' growth with innovations that revolutionized their industry. She developed AI-powered consumer analysis platforms that predicted market trends with stunning accuracy, attracting clients from every Fortune 500 company. "She's inhuman," marveled Dr. James Patterson, a Harvard professor who consulted for Smith Technologies. "I've never seen anyone her age with this level of strategic thinking." "She's motivated," Almeta replied simply. Meanwhile, Rodway Industries continued its slow decline. Jim's traditional business model couldn't compete with technology-driven companies like Smith Technologies, though he still didn't recognize the name or realize who was behind his competition. "We need innovation," Jim's board members kept telling him during increasingly tense meetings. "Companies like Smith Technologies are making us look obsolete." "Smith Technologies?" Jim barely glanced up from his whiskey. "Never heard of them. They're revolutionizing corporate consulting. Maybe we should consider hiring them." "Absolutely not. Rodway Industries doesn't need outside help from some startup." But his arrogance was costing him everything. Major clients were switching to Smith Technologies, quarterly losses were mounting, and his marriage to Cassandra was deteriorating as she watched their lifestyle threatened. "You're an idiot," Cassandra told him during one of their increasingly frequent arguments. "Your pride is going to bankrupt us. My father built this company. Your father is dead, and his strategies died with him. Wake up before we lose everything." At 16, Melody started Harvard Business School as the youngest student in the program's history. She commuted from their Boston headquarters, maintaining her CEO duties while attending classes, writing papers that professors used as examples for older students. "Ms. Smith," Professor Michaela Torres said after one particularly brilliant presentation on disruptive business models, "have you considered writing a book about building Smith Technologies?" "I'm too busy actually building it to write about it yet," Melody replied. "Maybe after I'm finished." "Finished with what?" "Taking over my industry completely." Her confidence wasn't arrogance. It was accurate assessment. By her 17th birthday, Smith Technologies was valued at over $400 million and showing no signs of slowing down. They'd opened offices in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, employed over 500 people, and had consulting contracts with 18 Fortune 500 companies. "We're ready for the next phase," Melody told Almeta during their weekly strategy meeting, "which is direct competition. I want us to enter every market where Rodway Industries operates. Real estate development, construction, manufacturing, everything. That's outside our expertise. Then we'll acquire expertise, buy smaller companies, hire the best talent, whatever it takes." Melody's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "I want him to watch his empire crumble while ours rises to take its place. This is going to cost hundreds of millions. We'll raise the capital. I want to go public next year." Almeta stared at her daughter with amazement and slight concern. "Melody, you're 17 years old. The stress of running a public company." "I've been under stress my entire life," Melody interrupted. "First, from poverty, then from building this company, now from preparing to destroy the man who created that poverty. Stress doesn't scare me anymore. Failure does." "What if he recognizes you? What if he realizes who you are before you're ready?" Melody smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like Jim had at 25. Confident, determined, and slightly dangerous. "Then I'll introduce myself properly, but by then, it'll be too late for him to do anything about it." Outside their office windows, Boston sparkled in the evening light. Somewhere in that maze of buildings, Jim Rodway was drowning in debt and delusion, completely unaware that his abandoned daughter was building the weapon that would destroy him. The final phase of their long revenge was about to begin, and this time, there would be no mercy. Chapter 7. The Invisible War. At 18 years old, Melody Smith had become the youngest CEO to take a company public in American history, and she used that achievement to launch her calculated assault on her father's empire with surgical precision that would have impressed military strategists. The opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange rang at 9:30 a.m. on a crisp October morning, and by market close, Smith Technologies had raised $1.2 billion in its IPO, with stock prices soaring 340% above their opening value. "Ms. Smith," shouted reporters as Melody walked down Wall Street afterward, "what's next for Smith Technologies?" Melody paused on the steps of the exchange, looking every inch the confident young billionaire in her tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back in an elegant chignon that emphasized her striking blue eyes. "We're entering new markets," she announced to the crowd of financial journalists. "Real estate development, construction, manufacturing. We're going to revolutionize every industry we touch." What she didn't say was that those were exactly the industries where Rodway Industries operated. The war began immediately. Within days of their IPO, Smith Technologies started acquiring smaller companies in direct competition with Rodway Industries' core businesses. But Melody's strategy wasn't to outspend her father, it was to outthink him. "Traditional business models are dinosaurs," she explained to her newly expanded board of directors. "We're not just entering these markets, we're evolving them." While Rodway Industries still operated using 1990s strategies, Smith Technologies implemented cutting-edge technology in every acquisition. They used AI to optimize construction schedules, big data to identify profitable real estate opportunities, and automation to reduce manufacturing costs. "How are they doing this so quickly?" Jim demanded during an emergency board meeting as he watched another major client switch to Smith Technologies. "They've been in our markets for 6 months, and they're already stealing our business." "They're innovative," replied board member Margaret Chen, no relation to Jennifer. "Their technology integration is years ahead of anything we're doing. Technology is a fad. Our clients value tradition and reliability." "Jim, we lost 3 more major contracts this week, all to Smith Technologies." But Jim's arrogance blinded him to the magnitude of the threat. He still didn't bother researching his competitor, dismissing them as another Silicon Valley startup that'll burn through their funding in 2 years. Meanwhile, Melody systematically dismantled his empire piece by piece. She hired away Rodway Industries' best employees by offering them 50% salary increases and stock options. She outbid them on every major project by calculating exactly how low she could go while maintaining profit margins. Most devastatingly, she offered their clients superior services at competitive prices. Her most brilliant stroke was targeting Rodway's longtime clients with personalized presentations that exposed exactly how outdated their current services were. When Brookstone Development had been using Rodway Industries for construction management for 15 years, Melody's team showed them 3D modeling software that could cut their timelines by 30% and reduce costs by 20%. "Your current contractor is using 1990s methodologies," Melody explained to Brookstone's board, her presentation featuring real-time comparisons. "We're offering 2025 solutions with proven results." Within 3 months, Brookstone had switched to Smith Technologies, bringing their $50 million annual contract with them. The same scenario played out across Jim's client base. Heritage Manufacturing saw Smith Technologies' automated inventory systems and realized Rodway's manual processes were costing them millions in inefficiency. Coastal Properties watched Melody's AI-powered market analysis predict development opportunities with 94% accuracy, while Rodway's traditional methods achieved only 60%. "They're not just competitive," complained David Chen, Rodway's head of client relations. "They're making us look like dinosaurs. Our clients are asking why we don't have the technology Smith Technologies offers." "Because we don't chase every tech fad," Jim replied dismissively during a staff meeting. "Our clients value stability and tradition." "Jim, we've lost 8 major clients this quarter, all to Smith Technologies." Meanwhile, Melody's employee recruitment strategy was equally devastating. She identified Rodway's most talented staff members and made them offers they couldn't refuse. Sarah Mitchell, their best project manager, received a 70% salary increase and the title of Vice President of Operations. Engineering team leader Marcus Rodriguez got stock options worth potentially millions. It's like they know exactly who our key people are and exactly what would motivate them to leave, observed HR Director Patricia Wells during a retention meeting. Maybe we should consider counter-offers, suggested Tony Ramirez. With what money? Jim asked bitterly. They're offering packages we can't match. What Jim didn't realize was that Melody had spent months researching every Rodway employee's personal situation. She knew Sarah Mitchell was struggling with her daughter's college tuition. She knew Marcus Rodriguez wanted to buy a house but couldn't qualify for a mortgage on his current salary. She offered solutions to their problems, not just job changes. But her masterpiece was psychological warfare. Melody had studied Jim's management style for years through former employees and industry contacts. She knew exactly how to push him towards self-destruction. Send him the quarterly reports, she told her strategy team. Make sure he sees exactly how much market share he's lost to us. But don't include our company name on the cover. Just list us as competitor A. I want him paranoid and desperate before he even knows who's destroying him. That's brilliantly cruel, observed David Kim, their lead programmer. He destroyed my family when I was helpless, Melody replied without emotion. Now I'm destroying his empire while he's powerless. The poetry is intentional. She had Jim's psychology mapped like a battlefield. Every move she made was designed to trigger his worst impulses. His arrogance, his refusal to adapt, his need to control everything. While he blamed external forces for his failures, Melody was orchestrating every disaster from the shadows. It's like they care about us as people, not just workers, Sarah had told her colleagues before leaving. When was the last time Mr. Rodway asked about my family? The answer was never, and Melody had counted on that. It's like they know our business better than we do, complained Tony Ramirez, Rodway's head of operations. Every weakness we have, they've found a solution for. Because I do know your business, Melody murmured to herself from her corner office, studying intelligence reports her team had compiled on every aspect of Rodway Industries' operations. I've been studying you my entire life. She knew Jim's management style was authoritarian and inflexible. She knew which employees were dissatisfied with their compensation. She knew which clients were frustrated with Rodway's slow adaptation to modern business practices. Most importantly, she knew exactly how much debt her father was carrying and how precarious his financial situation had become. "Ma'am," her assistant announced one morning, "we have a meeting request from Cassandra Rodway. She wants to discuss a potential consulting contract." Melody's pulse quickened. The woman who'd helped destroy her family was reaching out personally. "Set it up for next week. Conference room A." Cassandra Webb Rodway swept into Smith Technologies headquarters like she still owned the world. Her designer clothes and perfect makeup projecting wealth and confidence that Melody immediately recognized as increasingly desperate. "Miss Smith." Cassandra extended a manicured hand. "Thank you for meeting with me. I've heard remarkable things about your company." Melody shook hands politely, studying the woman who'd been wearing a white dress and engagement ring in her mother's hospital room 18 years ago. Cassandra was still beautiful, but there were lines around her eyes and a tightness to her smile that suggested the perfect life wasn't as perfect as advertised. "Mrs. Rodway, what can Smith Technologies do for you?" "Please call me Cassandra. I'm here because Rodway Industries needs modernization, and your company seems to be the obvious choice for that transformation." "I see. And what does Mr. Rodway think about this potential partnership?" Cassandra's smile faltered slightly. "My husband is traditional in his business approach, but I handle many of our strategic initiatives now." Translation: Jim was losing control, and Cassandra was trying to save their empire behind his back. What specific services are you looking for? Complete operational overhaul, technology integration, market analysis, competitive positioning. Essentially, we need you to help us figure out how to compete with companies like... Cassandra paused, checking her notes. Well, like yours. Melody almost smiled. You want us to help you compete with ourselves? I want you to help us stay relevant. Smith Technologies has revolutionized every market you've entered. We need to understand how you do it. And you think we'd share our trade secrets with a direct competitor? I think you'd be paid exceptionally well for your expertise. Money tends to overcome most business conflicts. Melody leaned back in her chair, studying Cassandra with the same intensity she brought to analyzing market data. This woman had destroyed her family's happiness for money. Now she was begging that same family for salvation, not knowing who she was talking to. I'll consider your proposal, Melody said finally. But I should mention, we don't typically work with companies whose leadership lacks vision. Cassandra's professional mask slipped slightly. Meaning if Rodway Industries wants our help, Mr. Rodway himself needs to be committed to change. Half measures and behind-the-scenes maneuvering won't save a sinking ship. I can bring Jim to our next meeting. Please do. I'd be very interested in meeting him. After Cassandra left, Melody sat alone in her office, heart pounding with anticipation. Soon, very soon, she would come face to face with the man who'd abandoned her before birth. But first, she had more work to do. Over the next 6 months, Smith Technologies' assault on Rodway Industries intensified. They opened competing offices in every city where Rodway operated. They launched a construction division that immediately began underbidding Rodway on major projects. They acquired a manufacturing company that produced the same industrial equipment as Rodway's factories, but with 30% better efficiency. We're hemorrhaging money, Jim's CFO warned during a particularly grim quarterly review. If current trends continue, we'll be insolvent within 18 months. That's impossible, Jim insisted. This company has been profitable for 40 years. Not anymore. Smith Technologies is destroying us in every market. Then we'll destroy them back. What do we know about their leadership? Not much. The CEO is Melody Smith, young woman, Harvard MBA, built the company from scratch. She's formidable. She's a child playing with daddy's money. How dangerous can she be? But Jim's board members were losing confidence in his leadership. Margaret Chen requested a private meeting to discuss the future direction of the company. Jim, she said carefully, the board is concerned about our competitive position. We'll rebound. We always do. Not this time. Smith Technologies isn't just another competitor. They're systematically dismantling everything your father built. We need new leadership, or we need to sell. Sell? Jim's voice rose dangerously. Absolutely not. This company is my legacy. Then prove you can save it. Meet with Smith Technologies. See if there's a way to work together instead of competing. I will not beg for help from some startup. Then you'll watch everything your father created disappear. That night, Jim sat alone in his father's old office, drinking whiskey and staring at family photos from happier times. Cassandra had already moved into the guest bedroom, their marriage another casualty of his failing empire. He'd fought so hard to inherit his father's wealth, sacrificing everything he'd once loved. Now that inheritance was slipping away, and he had nothing left to show for his choices. Meanwhile, in her corner office across the city, Melody Smith was planning the final phase of her campaign. Soon, she would meet her father face to face. Soon, he would learn the price of abandoning his family. And soon, justice would finally be served. The invisible war was almost over, and Melody Smith was about to win everything. Chapter 8. The Noose Tightens. Cassandra Webb Rodway filed for divorce on a grey December morning, just as Rodway Industries' stock hit an all-time low and Smith Technologies announced its acquisition of their largest manufacturing competitor. Jim found the papers on his desk beside his morning coffee, along with a note written in Cassandra's elegant handwriting. "I married you for your empire. Since you no longer have one, this marriage is over. My lawyers will be in touch about the asset division." For several minutes, Jim sat frozen in his father's chair, staring at documents that would cut his remaining wealth in half. Outside his office windows, Boston's skyline looked grey and forbidding, matching his internal devastation. "Sir?" His assistant knocked timidly. "The board members are here for the emergency meeting." Jim straightened his tie and tried to compose himself. "Send them in." The mood in the boardroom was funeral solemn. Margaret Chen, Robert Stevens, Thomas Walsh, and 5 other board members sat around the table with expressions ranging from disappointed to openly hostile. "Jim," Margaret began without preamble, "we need to discuss immediate action to save this company." "I'm listening." "Smith Technologies has made an informal inquiry about acquiring our construction division." "Absolutely not. It's a fair offer. More than fair, actually. They're offering 30% above market value. They're vultures picking at our bones." Robert Stevens leaned forward. "Jim, be realistic. That division is losing money every quarter. Smith Technologies could turn it profitable within 6 months. Because they're using unfair competitive practices." "They're using modern business practices," Thomas Walsh corrected. "Practices we should have implemented years ago." "My father built this company on solid fundamentals." "Your father has been dead for 18 years, Margaret interrupted sharply. "His business model died with him. We're living in 2025, not 1995. Jim's hands clenched into fists. "What are you saying?" "We're saying you have 2 choices. Modernize immediately or sell everything while we can still get decent offers." "I won't sell my father's legacy to some upstart tech company." "Then maybe it's time for new leadership." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jim looked around the table, seeing resignation and determination in faces that had once respected him. "You're talking about removing me as CEO." "We're talking about saving what's left of this company," Margaret replied, "and that might require difficult decisions." "I built this company." "You inherited this company," Robert corrected, "and you've nearly destroyed it through stubbornness and poor leadership." That afternoon, Jim sat alone in his office, drinking whiskey at 2 p.m. and staring at financial reports that painted an increasingly desperate picture. Rodway Industries was hemorrhaging money, losing clients, and rapidly approaching insolvency. For the first time in years, Jim allowed himself to think about the choices that had brought him here. 20 years ago, he'd had everything. A brilliant wife who loved him, a daughter on the way, and the promise of building something meaningful together. Instead, he'd chosen his father's money and his mother's approval. Now, Cassandra was gone, taking half his remaining wealth. His board wanted him removed, his empire was crumbling, and the mysterious Melody Smith, a name that nagged at him with strange familiarity, was building everything he was losing. "Smith," he murmured, rolling the name around his tongue. Why did it feel significant? He'd known an Almeta Smith once, long ago, but that was impossible. She'd been a poor scholarship student who'd disappeared from his life completely. Jim pulled out his laptop and did something he'd never bothered to do before. He researched Smith Technologies' leadership team. Melody Smith, age 18, CEO and founder. Harvard MBA. Daughter of Almeta Smith, company co-founder. Almeta Smith. Jim's hands began to shake as he stared at the name on his screen. It couldn't be the same woman. His Almeta had been broken, homeless, defeated when he'd last seen her. This Almeta Smith was described as a brilliant strategist, and visionary business leader. But the coincidence was too strong to ignore. Smith Technologies had appeared 2 years ago and immediately begun targeting every market where Rodway Industries operated. They seemed to know his company's weaknesses better than he did. Their strategies were designed specifically to exploit his failures. "No," Jim whispered, his heart racing. "It's not possible." But even as he denied it, pieces began falling into place. The surgical precision of Smith Technologies' attacks, the way they seemed to anticipate his every move, the fact that they'd grown from nothing to threaten his entire empire in just 2 years. What if the woman he'd betrayed had spent 20 years planning this revenge? What if the daughter he'd rejected had become the weapon that would destroy him? Jim's phone buzzed with another text from his lawyer about Cassandra's divorce demands. His board was scheduling another emergency meeting. His creditors were calling daily. Everything was falling apart simultaneously, as if orchestrated by someone who understood exactly how to break him. Someone who had 20 years to study his weaknesses and plan his downfall. Someone who had every reason to hate him. "Sir?" His assistant appeared in the doorway again. "There's a Melody Smith here to see you, from Smith Technologies." Jim's head snapped up. "She's here. Now?" "She doesn't have an appointment, but she said it was urgent regarding our conversation with Mrs. Rodway about potential partnerships." Jim's heart began racing. The woman who was destroying his life wanted to meet face to face. Part of him was curious about his nemesis. Part of him was terrified of what she might offer. "Send her in." Melody Smith entered his office with the confidence of someone who owned the world, and Jim's first thought was that she looked impossibly young to wield such power. She was tall, elegant, and professionally dressed, but there was something about her eyes that seemed familiar. "Mr. Rodway," she extended her hand with a polite smile. "Thank you for meeting with me on short notice, Ms. Smith." Jim shook her hand, studying her face carefully. "I have to admit, I'm curious about what brings you here personally. I wanted to discuss the future of your company." "My company's future is not your concern." Melody sat down without invitation, crossing her legs and studying him with those strangely familiar blue eyes. "Actually, it is. Smith Technologies is considering several acquisition offers for various Rodway Industries divisions. You want to buy pieces of my empire? I want to buy all of it." The blunt statement hit Jim like a physical blow. "That's not for sale." "Everything is for sale at the right price, Mr. Rodway. The question is whether you'll accept a fair offer or wait until bankruptcy forces a fire sale." "We're not bankrupt." "Not yet, but your current trajectory suggests insolvency within 12 to 18 months. Melody opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with financial documents. "I've had my analysts review your company's performance. Would you like to see their projections?" Jim didn't want to, but morbid curiosity compelled him to examine the papers. The analysis was devastatingly accurate, predicting exactly when various divisions would become unprofitable and how much debt would accumulate before total collapse. "How did you get this information?" "Public records, industry analysis, and logical deduction." "Your company's problems aren't secrets, Mr. Rodway. They're headlines." "What are you offering?" "Complete acquisition, all divisions, all assets, all debts. $150 million. Jim laughed bitterly. This company was worth $500 million 5 years ago. 5 years ago it was profitable. Today it's a liability that's only getting worse. Melody leaned forward slightly. "My offer covers all outstanding debts and leaves you with enough money to retire comfortably. That's more generous than most vultures would offer." "Why are you being generous?" For just a moment, something flickered in Melody's eyes, something cold and calculating that made Jim's skin crawl. "Let's call it professional courtesy. I need time to consider this." "Of course. But Mr. Rodway?" Melody stood to leave, pausing at his office door. "This offer expires in 30 days. After that, my next offer will be significantly lower." "Is that a threat?" "It's a business reality. Every day you wait, your company becomes worth less, and my offer becomes more generous than you deserve." After she left, Jim sat in stunned silence. $150 million for an empire that had once seemed infinite. It was a fortune by most standards, but it represented the complete destruction of everything his father had built. That evening, alone in his empty mansion, Cassandra had already moved out. Jim made a decision that felt like signing his own death warrant. He would accept Smith Technologies' offer, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. The alternative was watching everything collapse into worthless bankruptcy while his debts mounted beyond hope of recovery. The next morning, he called Margaret Chen to schedule another board meeting. "I've decided to accept Smith Technologies' acquisition offer," he announced to the assembled board members. The relief in the room was palpable. "It's the right decision," Margaret said gently. "Painful, but right." "When do we meet with their representatives?" Ms. Smith suggested a formal presentation next week. Full board attendance, media present, all the appropriate ceremony for such a significant transaction. Jim nodded numbly. Next week, he would officially surrender his father's empire to a woman young enough to be his daughter. He had no idea how accurate that assessment truly was. "One more thing," Margaret added. "Ms. Smith specifically requested that Mrs. Almetta Smith be present for the final signing ceremony." "Who's that?" "According to their corporate records, she's the company's founder and Ms. Melody Smith's business partner." Jim felt a chill of premonition, but he couldn't place why that name sounded familiar. "Fine, whatever they want. Let's just get this over with." Outside the boardroom windows, snow began falling on Boston, as if the sky itself was mourning the end of the Rodway Empire. In 7 days, Jim would discover that his greatest enemy had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years, and by then it would be far too late to change anything. Chapter 9. The Trap Closes. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Millennium Tower had been transformed into a courtroom where Jim Rodway would face judgment for crimes he'd forgotten he'd committed, though he didn't know it yet. Media representatives filled the back rows, cameras and recording equipment ready to document what the business press was calling the acquisition of the decade. CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal had all sent their top business correspondents. The buzz in the room was electric. Everyone sensed this was more than a routine corporate transaction. "This is unprecedented," whispered Jennifer Walsh from Forbes to her cameraman. "A company barely 3 years old acquiring a 40-year-old empire. There's got to be more to this story." Board members from both companies sat at a massive mahogany table, legal documents stacked in precise piles, waiting for signatures that would transfer the Rodway Empire to Smith Technologies. The paperwork was inches thick: contracts, asset transfers, employee agreements, intellectual property rights. 20 years of Charles Rodway's life's work reduced to legal documents. Jim arrived 15 minutes early, wearing his best suit and trying to project confidence he didn't feel. His hands shook slightly as he straightened his tie, and he'd barely slept in 3 days. Losing his father's company was devastating enough without looking weak in front of cameras that would broadcast his failure to the entire business world. "Mr. Rodway," Margaret Chen greeted him quietly, her voice filled with something that might have been sympathy. "The Smith Technologies team will be here shortly. Are you ready for this?" "As ready as anyone can be to sell their soul." "Jim, you're making the right choice. This company would have been worthless in bankruptcy. That doesn't make it hurt less." Jim looked around the conference room, noting the expensive artwork and panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Soon, none of this would belong to his family anymore. Robert Stevens approached, his expression grim. "Jim, I want you to know the board appreciates how difficult this is, but Smith Technologies has been generous with the terms, more generous than they needed to be. Generous enough to ease their consciences about dismantling my father's legacy? Generous enough to ensure you walk away financially secure instead of losing everything in bankruptcy court." At exactly 2 p.m., the conference room doors opened. The media representatives straightened in their seats, cameras turning toward the entrance. Board members looked up from their whispered conversations. Even the lawyers stopped shuffling papers. Melody Smith entered first, looking every inch the conquering corporate queen in a charcoal grey power suit that emphasized her youth and authority. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a battle. Her blonde hair pulled back in a severe chignon that made her blue eyes look like chips of ice. Behind her walked several Smith Technologies executives, lawyers, and financial advisors, an entourage that projected wealth and power. The room fell silent as she surveyed the assembled crowd with the cool assessment of a general reviewing conquered territory. Her gaze lingered on Jim for just a moment longer than the others, and something in her expression made his skin crawl with inexplicable dread. And then Almeta Smith stepped through the doorway. Jim's world stopped. 18 years collapsed in an instant as he stared at the woman he'd thrown out of a hospital room while she was bleeding from childbirth. Almeta looked magnificent, successful, elegant, and coldly beautiful in a way that spoke of wealth and power earned through decades of struggle. "No," Jim whispered, his face draining of color as understanding crashed over him like a tsunami. Almeta met his eyes across the conference room with a smile that could have frozen fire. "Hello, Jim. It's been a long time." Every person in the room sensed the sudden tension, but nobody understood its source except the 3 people whose lives had been shattered in a maternity ward 2 decades earlier. "I don't understand," Margaret Chen said, looking between Jim and Almeta with confusion. "Do you two know each other?" "Oh, yes," Melody said, her voice carrying across the silent room with crystal clarity. "Mr. Rodway and my mother have a history, don't you, Daddy?" The word hit Jim like a physical blow. He staggered slightly, gripping the edge of the conference table for support as he stared at the young woman who'd been systematically destroying his empire for 2 years. "Daddy," someone whispered in the back of the room. "That's right," Melody continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. "James Rodway is my biological father. The man who abandoned my pregnant mother in a hospital room 18 years ago because he chose $500 million over his own family." The media representatives erupted into frantic activity, cameras flashing and recording equipment humming as they realized they were witnessing something far more dramatic than a simple business acquisition. "But here's what makes this even more beautiful," Melody said, her smile turning predatory as she locked eyes with Jim. "Every single business decision I've made for the past 2 years has been designed specifically to destroy you. Every client I stole, every employee I poached, every contract I won, it was all part of a 20-year plan to take everything you chose over your daughter." Jim's face went ashen. "The timing. You've been planning this since the day you threw us away like garbage." "Oh yes, Daddy. Every strategy session, every market analysis, every corporate raid, I was thinking of you. Do you know what I named our first AI program? Project Karma. And it's been systematically dismantling your empire algorithm by algorithm. But why now? Why reveal yourself?" Melody's laugh was cold and musical. "Because I wanted you to lose everything the same way you made us lose everything. Slowly, painfully, watching it slip away piece by piece until there was nothing left but the devastating realization of what you threw away. And now in front of all these cameras, in front of your board, in front of the entire business world, you get to know that the daughter you rejected before she was even born just bought your soul. Jim sank into his chair, the full magnitude of his situation finally clear. You could have told me who you were. We could have worked together. I could have been part of her life. Could you? Almeta asked mockingly. The same man who called our love a fraternity bet? The same man who questioned whether she was even yours? The same man who chose money over his own child? I was young. I made mistakes. You made choices, Melody corrected, and today you get to live with the consequences. Margaret Chen cleared her throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should postpone this meeting until— No, Melody said firmly. We're proceeding exactly as planned. Mr. Rodway is going to sign those papers and sell me everything he valued more than his family. Aren't you, Daddy? Jim looked around the room desperately. The media was recording every word. His board members were staring at him with shock and disgust. The legal documents waited on the table, requiring only his signature to complete his destruction. If I don't sign, then you'll lose everything anyway in bankruptcy court within 6 months, Melody replied matter-of-factly. The only difference is whether you walk away with enough money to live comfortably or whether you lose everything and face criminal charges for financial mismanagement. This is extortion. This is justice. Jim stared at his daughter, his brilliant, ruthless, successful daughter who'd built an empire from nothing while he'd squandered an inheritance worth hundreds of millions. She had his eyes but Almeta's strength, his ambition but her mother's integrity. You could have been anything, he said quietly. You could have had anything. I am everything I chose to become, and I do have everything I wanted. Melody's voice softened slightly. I have a mother who sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. I have a company I built with my own hands and my own ideas. I have people who respect me for what I've accomplished, not what I inherited. And what about forgiveness? What about family? Family. Melody's laugh was bitter. You had a family. You threw it away for money. Today, I'm buying that money back from you. Almeta spoke for the first time in several minutes. Sign the papers, Jim. Take the money and disappear from our lives the way you did 20 years ago. Jim picked up the pen with shaking hands. Around him, cameras captured every moment of his humiliation. His father's empire was about to belong to the granddaughter Charles Rodway had never wanted. For what it's worth, he said as he signed the first document, I did love your mother. Once. Once wasn't enough, Melody replied. One by one, Jim signed away every asset, every property, every piece of the empire he'd inherited. With each signature, more of his father's legacy transferred to the daughter he'd abandoned. When the last document was signed, Melody stood and addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Smith Technologies has officially acquired all assets of Rodway Industries. Effective immediately, Mr. James Rodway is terminated from all positions within the company and is banned from all company properties. She turned to face him directly. Security will escort you from the building. You have 30 minutes to collect personal items from your office. Melody? Ms. Smith, she corrected coldly. We're not family, Mr. Rodway. We never were. As security guards appeared to escort Jim from the building, he turned for one last look at the daughter he'd rejected and the woman he'd betrayed. They stood together, mother and daughter, partners in business and life, successful beyond anything he'd achieved with his inheritance. They had built something real and lasting, while he had merely managed what someone else created. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Neither woman responded. They simply watched as security led him away from the empire that had once seemed so important and toward a future that would be very different from the one he'd imagined. Outside the Millennium Tower, Jim Rodway stood on the sidewalk with a check for $150 million and the crushing knowledge that he had just lost the most important things he'd ever had. 18 years too late, he finally understood what his father's money had really cost him, everything that mattered. Chapter 10. Justice Served. The final confrontation lasted exactly 7 minutes, but those 7 minutes erased 20 years of injustice with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Jim Rodway sat alone in the empty conference room as reporters filed out, his hands still shaking from signing away his father's empire. The check for $150 million lay on the table in front of him. More money than most people would see in a lifetime, but it felt like 30 pieces of silver. "Mr. Rodway?" A security guard appeared in the doorway. "Mom says you have 30 minutes to collect your personal items." "Mom?" "Ms. Smith, your daughter. She owns the building now." The words hit Jim like physical blows. His daughter owned everything now. The little girl he'd rejected before she was born had become the most powerful person in his world. Jim walked through Rodway Industries headquarters one final time, past cubicles and offices where employees were already packing their belongings or hanging Smith Technologies banners. The transition was swift and efficient, as if his life's work was being erased in real time. In his father's office, his office for 20 years, Jim opened desk drawers and filing cabinets, looking for items worth keeping. Photos of business achievements that no longer mattered. Awards that felt hollow now. A silver pen set his father had given him, engraved with Charles Rodway and Son. "There is no son anymore," he murmured, putting the pen set in a cardboard box. A soft knock interrupted his packing. Melody stood in the doorway, watching him with those unsettling blue eyes that mirrored his own. "May I come in?" Jim nodded, not trusting his voice. Melody entered and closed the door behind her, creating a private space for what Jim suspected would be their final conversation. "I wanted to speak with you alone," she said, sitting in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where his father had once explained that money mattered more than love. "To gloat? To ask you a question?" Melody leaned forward slightly, her piercing gaze fixed on his face. "Do you remember what you said to my mother in that hospital room?" Jim closed his eyes, the memory still painful after 18 years. "I said terrible things, unforgivable things. You said I wasn't your daughter. You claimed she was just a fraternity bet. You said we were nothing to you." Melody's voice remained steady, but Jim could hear the deep hurt beneath her control. "Do you remember?" "Yes. Were you lying to hurt her, or did you really believe those things?" The question hung in the air between them. Jim had asked himself the same thing countless times over the years, usually while drunk and alone in his empty mansion. "I was lying," he admitted quietly. "I knew you were mine the moment I saw you. You had my eyes, my stubborn chin, and your mother. She'd never been with anyone else. I knew she was faithful. Then why? Because I was weak. Because I chose money over love, inheritance over integrity. Because I was exactly the kind of man your mother deserved, better than—" Melody was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with an expression he couldn't read. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" she asked finally. "Tell me." "Growing up wondering if I wasn't good enough, if there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made my own father not want me." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was valedictorian of my high school class, summa cum laude at Harvard, built a billion-dollar company before I turned 19, and none of it felt like enough, because the first man who was supposed to love me had rejected me before I even took my first breath." Jim's heart shattered completely. "Melody, you are extraordinary. You're everything I could have hoped for in a daughter and more than I deserved. I know that now. It took me 18 years to realize your rejection said nothing about my worth and everything about your character." She paused, studying his broken expression. Do you want to know the real tragedy here, Jim? What? If you had chosen us instead of the money, we could have built something incredible together. Your inheritance, my ideas, Mama's wisdom. We could have been unstoppable as a family. Instead, you chose $500 million over a family that would have been worth billions. The words hit Jim like bullets. I threw away everything that mattered for money that meant nothing without you to share it with. Exactly. You had a brilliant wife who loved you unconditionally and a daughter who could have inherited your ambition without your weakness. But you traded a dynasty for dollars. Melody's voice turned ice cold. And now you're sitting in this empty office, signing away the last remnants of what you chose over us, while we've built an empire that will outlast anything your father ever imagined. Jim broke completely. Tears streamed down his face as 20 years of suppressed regret crashed over him. I was a coward, a fool. The biggest mistake of my life wasn't losing your mother or rejecting you. It was believing that my father's money mattered more than my own family. And now? Now I have money and no family at all, Jim whispered. While you have a family fortune that will last generations and a mother who would die for you. She almost did. Multiple times, working 3 jobs, living in shelters, going without food so I could eat. Melody's voice grew stronger. She could have given up. She could have hated you forever and taught me to hate you too. But she didn't. What did she teach you? That actions have consequences. That integrity matters more than wealth. That true strength comes from building something yourself, not inheriting something from others. Melody smiled for the first time since entering the office. And that justice isn't about revenge, it's about truth. What's the truth here? The truth is that you made a choice 20 years ago that cost you everything that really mattered. The truth is that Mama and I survived without you and built something beautiful together. The truth is that you're my biological father, but you've never been my dad. Jim felt the finality in her words like a door closing forever. Is there any chance? For what? A relationship? Melody shook her head. I'm not angry anymore, Jim. But I'm not interested in playing father-daughter either. You had 20 years to be part of my life, and you chose not to be. So this is goodbye? This is closure. Melody moved toward the door, then paused. But I want you to know something. Mama and I aren't vindictive people. That check is legitimate. You'll be financially comfortable for the rest of your life if you're careful with it. Why? Because we're better people than you were 20 years ago. Melody opened the door. Try to be a better person than you were then, too. After she left, Jim sat alone in his father's office for the last time. Outside the windows, Boston hummed with activity, people building dreams, chasing ambitions, creating families that would last longer than any corporate empire. Somewhere in this city, his daughter was probably celebrating with the mother who'd raised her alone. They had each other, they had their success, and they had the satisfaction of justice finally served. Jim had a check and a lifetime of regret. As he walked out of Rodway Industries forever, carrying a single cardboard box of personal items, Jim realized that his father had been wrong about everything that mattered. Money wasn't the most important inheritance a man could leave his children. Love was. And Jim had thrown his away for numbers on a bank statement that meant nothing without someone to share them with. The security guards escorted him to the street, where his driver waited with his car. As they pulled away from the building, Jim saw Melody and Almetta standing together in the lobby, watching his departure through floor-to-ceiling windows. They looked like queens surveying their kingdom, and they were. 18 years after being thrown away like garbage, they had reclaimed everything and more. The daughter Jim hadn't wanted had become everything he'd never been. The woman he'd betrayed had built a legacy that would outlast his father's empire. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been earned.